here. And we are very happy to have two very important people here. And those of you who are in the grant or traineeship, a very important person for you. Both are you. So, this is Lynda Hinrichs. Did I say that right? Hinrichs. And Gretchen Ykema.
Yeah.
Spelled Y-K. Okay. And Lynda, I think you've seen this, so I'm going to read somewhat from this, is the Staff Development Manager for the state of Minnesota. So she is the person who manages the training throughout the state of Minnesota. But for you, very importantly, she is the person who arranges the practicum and internships also throughout the state of Minnesota. So
Gretchen's taking that over.
Oh, Gretchen's taking that over. I'll introduce her in a second.
Okay.
Okay. And then Gretchen, who is a staff development specialist, also in the same department, who sounds like she'll be a very important person for that also. I told the students that you were coming, and I told them that you may have some time to speak with people.
Afterwards?
Possibly afterwards.
Okay, sure.
And I don't know how brief or when you need to leave.
We are pretty open.
Pretty open
Yes.
today?
Yes.
Okay. So you might want to make some contact and some information. And from a personal standpoint, they're just very easy to work with and very good to work with. So I'll turn it over.
Nice. Oh.
Welcome.
And do you mind questions from time to time?
Yes, questions.
Thank you.
You can sprinkle them throughout the presentation that we have. And so it's really good to be here. And I'll just add that I've been with the state of Minnesota VRS program for just over a year. Prior to that, I worked at DHS in Disability Services Division for almost 3 years. And that was my introduction to the state of Minnesota employment. I had previously worked in the private sector for Wells Fargo for, if you can believe it, 26 years. That's kind of my background.
Wow.
And I have a Master's of Organizational Leadership from St. Mary's University. And that's probably enough about me. And Gretchen and I are a team. We're a team of two. We make up the staff development unit for the state of Minnesota Voc Rehab Services. I'm going to start by talking just a little bit overview, just so you understand the structure of the state of Minnesota VRS, and I'll get into some staffing, some what's driving us right now, and some staffing more specifics. And then Gretchen's going to take it over and talk to you about a day in the life of a counselor, because Gretchen was a counselor for 9 years, almost 9 years, yes. And I was just going to say, if you do want to sit, you're welcome. Are you okay? Okay, all right. I'm going to take the first part, and Gretchen's going to take the second part. And Gretchen will also hit on internships 411 for you. Am I talking loud enough? I don't tend to have that stage voice, but I'm going to try. That might help. That will help. Okay, so I handed out to you just an overview of what the state of Minnesota Voc Rehab program is about. The front page shows you the 3 different components of the VR program, and that has information on what makes up the Voc Rehab program. I'm going to start by just saying what the mission is for VRS, and that is to empower Minnesotans with disabilities to achieve their goals for employment, independent living, and community integration. So that's our official mission statement, and simplified, I would say what that means is everybody who wants to work should have the opportunity to work. So the Voc Rehab program is funded by the federal and state partnership of 80% federal, 20% state. So that's really important when it's budget crunch time, some budget shutdown, government shutdown threats, things like that happen throughout time. We're more concerned with the federal shutdown than we are the state. So just a little important information. But also we get a little bit of funding from the Social Security Administration. That's kind of a reimbursement program that we have with them. And so that's kind of how we operate. That's our budget. The other extended employment program, which is state funded, that helps. So of course spoke, Rehab helps people get jobs who have barriers and challenges to employment. And the Extended Employment Program helps people maintain or advance in employment. So it's a program that's state funded, as I mentioned, and it receives referrals from us, from VR, from counties, schools, and other sources. And it's accomplished by 27 community partners. And then the other piece of VRS is the independent living piece. So is anyone familiar with independent living? I'm sure you are. Many different backgrounds. Perhaps you've even worked at one. And there's, of course, one in St. Cloud. And that's called Independent Lifestyles. But there's 8 IL centers across the state. And we work very closely with them. And they provide services to Minnesotans with disabilities to live independently in the community. So they provide life training skills, they provide information and referrals, peer mentoring, and advocacy services information. So a very important piece, a very connecting piece for us into the community. All right, so that is pretty much the structure of VRS in a nutshell. And I wanted to then talk to you about the legislation that is currently really driving us and what we're working on. So anyone guess at what that is? WIOA. WIOA is just a really huge deal. It's like the legislation for people with disabilities. It's the most impactful legislation that we've had in decades. And it is really driving the way we provide our services. It's what we talk about all the time, how we are trying to match our staffing needs and the way we provide services to the community to abide by the new requirements. And even though it was signed into law in 2014, the final regs just came out this summer. So now we can move forward and really try and meet those requirements in every way that we possibly can to better our services and have better outcomes for employment with individuals with disabilities. All right, so the question that existed before WIOA was really, can this individual benefit from VR services? And that was the question. That was always the underlying question when we met with individuals, when we considered eligibility. So now that's changed to what supports are needed for this individual to become competitively employed in an integrated setting. So all of those words are very important, the competitive employment and then the integrated piece. All right. So that question now is what guides us, and also the requirement for those that are working in sub-minimum wage jobs. Typically that's a center-based employment opportunity. They have to have the chance yearly to consider employment that provides minimum wage or higher. So this is the piece that we're working on now to logistically figure out how to reach everyone and give them that opportunity. So it's a big deal. It's a big undertaking. And then also the other big piece is the pre-ETS, the pre-employment transition services. Are you familiar with what transition services means? Working with youth in the high schools. So youth and young adults, anyone who is pre-graduation of high school. So that is a huge initiative to provide work experience to individuals as young as 14. We are ramping up with training and trying to figure out how we can manage this increase on the demands of those transition counselors. So there's just a lot of change and a lot of work going on right now. Yes.
So a little bit about, so in the past it was age 16, correct? So
That's right.
One of the biggest.
That is a big change. So it's down to age 14.
Which is a huge deal.
You can imagine some of the added challenges when you think of age 14 versus age 16. Transportation, for instance. But that was written into the law. abide by that, and we have to start younger. And all right. You can imagine that it's just providing us with a lot of opportunities to learn, to provide training, to get up to speed, and really person-centered planning is one of the pieces that we are also having an initiative to get out there within the staff to really have that person-centered planning permeate through the organization. We're just starting to work with a consultant and design a training program to make sure that that's happening. That person-centered language is present in WIOA. It's, of course, in the Minnesota Olmstead Plan. It's part of the Minnesota Employment First Policy. You'll see person-centered everywhere. And it's very, very important that that approach is taken to the services that we provide. So we are in the midst of making sure our staff really knows what that's all about, and that we are going to be using tools that really give the individual with disabilities the choice and the control, and that it's not all on the counselor and the power that that person has from providing the service, but really it's the driving force from the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to make that point. It's just a really important initiative and discussion point that we've had of late. All right. Any questions so far? Pipe up if you have any. So then I wanted to go to the backside of the handout that I gave you. Just really briefly want to talk about how the leadership at VRS, how we make our decisions. We get together and we determine what our goals and strategies are, and then decision making can come from those goals and priorities. Because Lord knows we have more than enough to do, and sometimes we just find ourselves, okay, is it in our priorities? Is this on the priority list and within the strategic goals currently? So we came up with these. I know that you can read them. I won't go over them, but I also just wanted to share that there is a state rehab council, if you're familiar with that. Okay, so state rehab council is appointed by the governor, and the rehab council is really about partnering with us and being able to advise on our program, on everything from our strategic goals on down. So we meet very often, individuals within VRS. If there's an initiative, I spoke recently about the Person-Centered Practices Initiative. Our director, Kim Peck, is part of the council. We have a VR counselor, part of the council. We have a couple administrative members from VRS. Otherwise, it's made up of community partners and business leaders and tribal nations, and then individuals who have gone through our services. So they know firsthand what we do, maybe how we could improve. So we really weigh in a lot with the State Rehab Council. And they meet 10 times a year, so almost monthly, generally monthly, with the exception of July and November. So a very important piece of what we do, and having that ability to weigh in and to get advice is really instrumental, very, very important to us. So we're not just making decisions on our own without consulting with those community partners and business leaders that provide employment. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much the overview piece that I had. So then I wanted to move into the WIFM part. WIIFM, what's in it for me part. WIFM. All right. So the staffing piece. I do just this is either, yeah, just that one. I'm going to talk about that one. This is, so in general, one of my responsibilities are to provide a state report through the state plan that I'm working working to build staff capacity, build competencies within the staff, and also am looking out to make sure that we have enough well-qualified staff to come into positions such as counselors. Okay, so we do projections. We look at our current staffing level. We look at how many people could retire, so are approaching that age of 65, and then we need to kind of look at that and think, how are we going to fill those positions once they open up? So currently we have, and this is 2015 data, we have 160 counselors, and we have projected that 23% of those counselors could retire in the next 5 years. So doing the math, that's 37 counselors, and then we sometimes have a little bit of turnover, not a lot. Can't say we have a lot of turnover, but retirements, yes. We have an aging population in a lot of regions. So that's the good news for you guys. So, all right. So if you take a look at the career sheet that Gretchen just handed out, I was going to bring your attention to so these are basically positions within VRS from HR info, and it lists the job title, salary, the tasks, and the qualifications. Now, as a new counselor who would perhaps come into the organization after graduating, you would come in as a rehab counselor senior, so that's the second one listed. That's the entry point for new counselors, typically. It might depend on experience, could depend. In general, it will be that rehab counselor senior. And you'll see that the tasks are about assisting persons with physical, emotional, and mental disabilities in achieving employment, and conducting assessment, determining eligibility, offering counseling and guidance, assisting in developing and implementing an employment plan, and managing and expend case services funds, and then provide effective case and caseload management. So that's the expectation of that level. And of course, the qualifications are having a master's degree in a counseling or closely related field. And I was just going to mention that it says with graduate level coursework in theories and techniques of counseling. That's really, really important. So perhaps you are in that right now. Is that your current?
Yes.
Okay, current? Okay. So that is a requirement for employment within the state of Minnesota VRS program. So if someone, say, were to come from a different state and didn't have that, we would ask them to acquire that before we could hire. All right. So those courses are key for employment, and then so the other roles here listed, like the placement coordinator, who a counselor would work very closely with for finding employment, and then the rehab tech. The rehab tech position is the VR tech, who really handles a lot of the administrative and purchasing pieces that helps the counselor be able to focus on the individual with disability. So the VR tech takes care of a lot of the administrative work. Is that kind of it to describe the VR tech? Yes.
One of the things I like about Minnesota, because we just went to the National Rehab Counseling Association meetings, and a lot of states are moving towards VA level rehab counselors now, particularly in the southeast, because they can't find enough rehab counselors.
That's right.
But we're very dedicated to masters level
yes, we are.
right?
Yes, we are. Absolutely. I don't see that changing in the near future.
Good.
Yep. Very good point. So these are the roles within VRS. In addition, which I realized last night when I was kind of looking this over, it doesn't list every role within VRS, because we certainly have a lot of specialist roles, as in Gretchen is one case, one example, and you're not a case, you're an example. So there's then also the leadership piece of a lot of counselors decide to go into that managerial role of Rehab Area Manager, which is a RAM. So in that role, you give up your casework load and you manage those that have caseloads. So there's the RAM, then there's a regional manager level, there's 3 across the state, and then there's the field director. So that's kind of how that works. There were some competencies that I thought of that might be helpful for you to know about that are just important to be able to do your job well as a counselor. And it's something that you can work toward or once you become a counselor, really concentrate on. The legislation piece, just really knowing the ADA, knowing WIOA and the impact and the changes that is bringing, knowing what the Olmstead Plan is all about, because that's known as the blueprint of working with the disability community. So if you're not familiar with it, it's really easily accessible through Google, and so those pieces, just really important to understand what that's all about. And then also preparing yourself to be able to facilitate that self-exploration that is person-centered planning. So being able to really facilitate conversation, learning questions to ask and those ways to inquire that really allow that informed choice for the individual that you work with. Let's see, counseling techniques. I have to mention motivational interviewing. So if you're familiar with that technique, that is very highly regarded. Gretchen has proficiency in that, having been a counselor, and still is leading the group that we have within VRS, which is a coach's skill building group that does some training, does refresher training, that provides an intro to MI, which is a requirement for all staff within VRS to attend, and then the optional refreshers after that intro. So that's a really important piece. Yes?
Can I ask, with MI, is that we're learning a lot about how to develop your own style as a counselor, different theories that will inform our choice, and obviously we're being trained in MI this semester as as a counseling skill. I was just wondering, for the state, or specifically for VRS, is that that's what you want counselors to use, or do counselors have latitude, flexibility depending on the needs of the clients?
Yes. Yeah, we do train specifically in that. I think it's been 6 years now that we've been using motivational interviewing, but yes, we welcome other types of counseling techniques as well. You do have some latitude in it as well. Because there are folks around the agency that do prefer to use other ones, and that's okay.
It's the one that we, it's kind of our standard,
Yeah.
gold standard. Yeah. It's what we invest in. We invest in giving the time and resources to the group to keep their proficiency. We have an individual who is outside of DEED. She works actually for the Department of Corrections, and that division of the state really uses MI a lot. And there's some people that dedicate. I think she is completely dedicated to training MI within that organization. So she is excellent, and we bring her in to help keep the proficiency with our coaches. And so, very important piece. Yeah. All right, so I'm almost done here. I have one other thing, and that's just establishing a network with the community and employment resources. It's just a really, really important competency or skill to have. Just that networking, relationship building piece will serve you well as a counselor. So that's all that I have. Are there any questions? I moved quickly, but I think you guys got it all. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Gretchen, did you want to? Yes. I can do
This one first, yeah. Okay, well, the parts that I will kind of talk with you about today are what a day in the life of being a counselor with the state of Minnesota might look like, and then we'll get into some process stuff for internships, what steps to take if you're interested in interning with us. So we'll do that at the end. Wow, the short answer of what a day in the life looks like is it depends. It's different every single day. I would say not one day looks the same, not two counselors have the same kind of schedule, kind of meetings. It changes all the time. One day, I think I did kind of run some, I looked back at my old schedule. I would say on average, for me, now I can't say that my caseload was similar to every counselor's in the state, but I had about on average 7 to 8 client meetings a week. Some were less, some were, of course, more, probably depending on the area that you're at and the caseload size. Mine was a little bit smaller. You might have more in there. A typical day, you come in, check up on your correspondence. You are always going to have phone messages and emails to respond to from partners, co-workers, colleagues, of course, clients themselves. Then you might jump into checking your mail. Oh, you have a stack of medical records that you read through and start looking at eligibility and party for service determinations. Oh, but you've got a phone call, so you take that. Multitasking is a must. You will find yourself probably talking on the phone and entering a case note at the same time while somebody's standing at your door. So there's a lot of that going on. It's not a constant, but you'll definitely find yourself in that kind of a frenzy at times. A lot of partner contact, meetings in your office, outside of your office, partnering with the community partners, IL centers, the actual providers. Actually, I have a question. Who in here is familiar or has kind of worked in the field a little bit already? A couple of you who still has no idea really what they're getting themselves into. Be honest. That was me. I was that way too. I was sitting in class going, what is this? Even when you start your internship, what is this? When they say it takes about 3 years to learn your job, that's very true. Seems a little intimidating, but don't let that intimidate you. There's a lot to know, but you will get there. And every year you look back and go, oh, I think I got it now. And a year progresses, no, now I really got it. And another year goes by, no, now I really got it. But it's very fun and very exciting, very dynamic. You will be comfortable with living in the not knowing, in the gray. There is very little black and white, yes or no kinds of situations you're going to find yourself in. It depends kind of situation a lot. It's a lot of critical thinking, kind of analyzing a situation, really trying to understand the person's needs, what they're saying to you, just a lot of that kind of stuff happening. So when you talk about community partnerships and things like that, yeah, because there's a lot of people usually on a team too, so it's deciphering all that with working with others. You spend a lot of time at a computer, which sounds kind of like backwards to that, we're a social service, we work with people, but our caseload management system is online, so we do a lot of documentation, all of our forms, plans, everything that you work with the individual does come from online. So you do kind of seem to spend a lot of time there, plus our correspondence with each other. Emailing is, of course, on your computer. Depending on where you are, you may work with a specific kind of caseload. So transition or adult generally is what you'll hear folks from the state at least talk about. Oh, I'm a transition counselor, I'm a general counselor is what they call it, or I have a mixed caseload. Transition, of course, is our youth in the high schools or in transition programming. And adults, or the general, is just adults. I had, when I started, a full transition caseload. So I served Hastings High School, Farmington High School, and Randolph, which is a smaller community south of there. So my office was in Burnsville, so I had to drive 45 minutes even to see the folks that I was working with. So there can be, again, some of that multitasking, kind of making sure, planning ahead, kind of things that you got to keep in mind. Then I slowly transitioned over to Shakopee to what we call a general caseload. It was mostly adults, a few schools here and there, but those were smaller schools. So I didn't have a lot of students. So you can have kind of anywhere in between. There are some caseloads too. People might describe that they're mostly folks with mental health. We do have a small unit of folks that do the deaf and hard of hearing individuals, just because that's kind of a specialized skill, and if you can't sign, communication can be rather difficult. Let's see, I'm trying to think of other specialties that caseloads might have. I think that's kind of what you might hear as you start exploring. Oh, what else can I say? Writing employment plans, writing a VR assessment of needs. Have you guys heard about this lingo and plans and VR assessment of needs? Some, maybe you guys are looking at me like. Part of the process, so you're constantly planning. And from day one, when when somebody comes in, I mean, there's motive to come to your door and sit at your desk, and it's part of your job to kind of always be assessing what their needs are and how we can help them and what it is that they want to do, what is their ultimate goal, what drives them. And so as a counselor, when somebody's eligible, we can work with them, right, and get going. There's a document, although it's just really a case note that we are required to write. It's called the VR Assessment of Needs. And it's essentially a snapshot in time. And this is sort of a working view of this person that you're working with in their particular situation. But it has to be written before you write a plan. So essentially the plan is your roadmap of what are we doing. So this individual sitting in front of you and says they want to be an auto mechanic. Well, how can we help you get there? What steps do we need to take or figure out in between now and then? And a plan is your roadmap. So there is actual paperwork documentation that you'll do as a counselor that comes from agency part that you'll have to fill out. But as a VR assessment of needs, I would say takes a lot of practice to do. It's not hard. But that seems to be one area that we do a lot of training on, and people tend to need a lot of work on. So if you start hearing that in classes, I don't know if you guys talk about that at all, just kind of assessing the situation and the impacts, the implications to employment. So, for example, if somebody uses a wheelchair for mobility, what impacts does that have on employment? And we could probably start listing off some of those things, but that's what it means. So you as a counselor are able to work through what are those disability implications, how do they impact their employment goal, or just working in general, kind of working through that and identifying what services or programs could we provide to help them be able to get to that goal, knowing all this, what we know about them. And that will change over time because, of course, we'll get to know people as we start working together and learn a little bit more here and there, more information kind of starts coming out. So that will evolve, but that's kind of a big document that you as a counselor can only do, actually. Counselors, you're the only ones that get to determine somebody eligible, determine their priority service category, write an employment plan. Well, then, of course, the VR assessment of needs. So your tech, your support staff can't do that. That's all rests on you guys, counselor. Questions? I know you've got them.
They might be a bit wide-eyed because it's only their fourth week of class.
Sure.
So they're learning a lot about different areas of rehab, and so a lot of what you're saying might be new to them.
Yep. And even if it's not new, I was in your seat once. Even if you've heard it, it still just kind of goes in and out until you're actually in there and you feel it and you experience what these things are. Then it starts to click. So you might start noticing that when you get some field experience. Like, oh, that makes sense. Now I know what you're talking about. Cool.
So we just, in our class on Mondays, the intro class, I actually just lectured on person-centered planning.
Cool.
And the importance of IDEs, so the employment plan and how to develop one.
Cool.
So they're familiar with it. I haven't required that they have to write one yet. But
No, it's kind of,
we just talked about that on Monday. So
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know that was what you were going to be speaking about.
Everything's connected.
Everything.
But I really emphasize the importance of person-centered. They're probably sick of hearing it because I have going on and on about it. But that's such a huge part of in any service to individuals with disabilities, but especially for VR. I know that they highly focus on person-centeredness.
Yeah. What questions do you have about just working as a counselor in general? Okay.
What were your challenges when you first started?
Figuring out what folk rehab was, to be honest. What the world of folk rehab was, just placing it in general within the state system. How does this work? What is public versus private rehab? Just kind of placing myself in the services in general, and then connecting to the outside world. So the partners that we have, how does that all work? And then just having experience in doing it. I learned a lesson early on. If you don't know something, you say you don't know, and you'll get the information to get back to them. Because there's a lot of times where, you know what, I'm not really sure on that. Let me check on that for you. It's a lot of learning through experience.
What do you do as far as for the individuals who may have a history of having a felon or, how does that play into all of that?
Definitely. We do have a counselor in Anoka County, David Fullerton, who has taken a special interest on folks who have significant criminal history. So, and you'll find that in our agency, we tend to have, as you really feel solid in what you're doing, you'll kind of specialize in a certain area and shine in that area. And David's done that. He does a few trainings for us around that. So I would probably consult. You'll hear that a lot. Consult. It's just one of those things that, what employers are out there that generally maybe they don't do a background check or they say they're felony friendly kinds of things. But of course there are some jobs that depending on the offense you can't do because of the law. So just kind of educating yourself about that. But if you're not sure, there's usually somebody you can consult with within the agency.
So you work through the various people who are aware of. Okay.
Yep. And then again, as you build your partnerships and knowledge of resources in your local area. For example, when I was in Shakopee, and this might be true for all workforce centers, the buildings that we're housed in, they have what's called a New Leaf workshop, which is I think a monthly workshop for people who have a criminal background to come and just learn about how that impacts their employment. And it was a state, somebody not in our agency that put this on, but it was a state-run workshop. So things like that, you kind of come across those things the longer you've been there and start to familiarize with your local resources. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, what you've got now is just our process. So when you get to the part of thinking about doing an internship and it's coming up, this would be the process if you're interested in seeing what's available through the state, through us. You essentially, there's more detail on this, but essentially contact me. My contact information is on here. We'd like to see a resume and kind of where you're at, and a cover letter and kind of where you're at in your program. I and Lynda, we are not the deciding factors in whether an internship is available, but I kind of act as, I guess, the coordinator between the local offices. So all inquiries come to me. I can then get to know you a little bit better in the area in which you might be interested in interning at. Being in St. Cloud, we do have a St. Cloud office, but we definitely do not have capacity to have an intern for every single one of you. So definitely Metro is going to have probably more opportunities because we have, what can I even tell you now, how many offices within the Metro area? Like six. It's highly concentrated down there. We have offices, of course, everywhere, but there's going to be more down there. And what I do is I reach out to the manager and I say, hey, and I send along the resume and cover letter. We have an interest in an internship at your site, and they usually will then talk to their staff and their counselors and see if it's the right time for that, if somebody can take that on and work with you. And if yes, they'll probably do an interview and make sure that's just the right fit for on both sides of the equation. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable and can learn in that site, and then vice versa too, that they feel like they are a good match for you as far as mentorship goes. So really the decision does lie on our managers. We leave that up to them and their staff to decide if they have capacity to take on an intern, but I'll act as your coordinator in that communication. Okay? Yeah.
Curious about how many interns a year the state can handle.
Can handle. Oh, that probably changes.
Yeah, it's varied a lot. I mean, the enrollment keeps going up, the demand for internships keeps going up. There's a real benefit to having someone come in and do an internship. You already know the office, if there's an opening, it's just kind of a beautiful thing. But, the capacity isn't always there. You've got staffing issues, you have things going on within a staff, you've got changes. Sometimes if an opening occurs, someone within the organization takes that location, like they wanted to really work over here, so then it's kind of a moving target. I would say at any given time we have five or six internships going on at once.
Is there a standard time frame?
For the length of the internship? Sure, that's part of the program requirements. So there's a specific number of hours for the practicum, which is 100.
Okay.
Practicum 100 and internship 600.
600.
700 hours.
Okay.
700 total.
Okay.
Yes.
And then
you
once
also work
that's
with different schools, don't you? You work with
Yes,
you
do. University of Wisconsin, Stout. Yes. And the good news about that is that, there's online students, and a lot of them in the metro, so that's students wanting internships in this region of the state, so that's good.
And also my Cato.
It's easy to get the positive side, but, and not to focus on the negative. But I'm curious, what are your struggles? What are the challenges, the biggest challenges you face each week? Is it the community and their willingness to work with some of our clients? Is it the client motivation and their follow through? Is it somewhere in between, a combination of all?
As a counselor?
Yeah.
Probably, let me think. Probably a little bit of both. When Lynda talked about before, the biggest struggle, and it kind of touches on some of those things, is your own internal, right? When somebody didn't do what they said they were going to do, whether it be the client or the partner. That mindfulness, that self-awareness that you have as a counselor, to be aware of that and know so that you can handle a situation the best that you can. That's been the biggest learning part that I've had. So the better you have at that, about understanding your values, your biases, what's important to you, what's not important to you, that's huge to help you get through those really hard parts. But yes, you're going to experience phone calls where somebody lost a job, or they walked off the job and yelled at the manager, or the partner never showed up to job coach, or whatever. There's fires, if you will, that happen all the time. So to be able to manage that so you don't burn out and able to really put your feelings aside and really focus on the person and what they need, it's going to be huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Since you touched on that with kind of like the burnout, what is like the time frame? Is this, I worked in staffing and sometimes that's not really a career field, that's kind of more short term and more of a temp agency, but once you get into the rehab counseling, is that something that people are there for 10, 15, 20 years, a little bit longer? There's not that turnaround?
I think so. I mean, I can only speak for what I've seen, but we have counselors who are, gosh, 30 years. Yeah. I think so from my perspective. You do have to be, take care of yourself and be aware of when you feel like you are burning out. And I hope that we facilitate in a community that encourages you to do that. But yeah, I've seen counselors stick around for a long time. And actually then generally will move on. Not always, but a lot of, I think almost all the managers, the RAMs, were counselors. A lot of folks in leadership were counselors. So you there is some other movement in other directions you can go into when you're ready to kind of move away from that.
As I said before about the retirements, most of the time that's where we get staff movement is retirements. Maybe one counselor a year, maybe one or two at the most, out of 160 might just leave or find something else, want to do something else. So very good retention numbers.
So one of the questions other presenters have answered is you said about 5 or 6 interns a year. What are the chances of getting hired afterwards?
That is really not guarantee and really the question of the hour is the openings and will the opening be where you want it to be, close to home. So there's just a lot of variables.
One of the things that we've seen in the past is that when the state trains you, they want to keep you. That's the goal. Right?
That's true.
So you intern, they want you.
That's true. You have definitely an advantage and a leg up on any other candidate if you've interned.
You put a lot of money and time into this.
Yes. I mean, the counselor's dedicated to be your mentor, basically, for those hours.
I think what else is nice about is an advantage is if you have an intern here in Minnesota in VR, VR is everywhere. It's in every state. So even if you were to relocate and you apply for a position at another VR in a different state, the fact that you intern through VR in Minnesota is definitely a step up, I would believe, and it's an advantage to being marketable and competitive within the field. So where versus other agencies, if it's a not-for-profit or a private organization that is only here.
we anticipate maybe some of their questions. So if they're interested in, part of what we have is a federal grant or federal traineeship program, so they have to go through the state of Minnesota. Their first step would be to contact
me. Yep.
you. How do you like that contact?
Either way, phone or email. Eventually, I would like a copy of the resume and cover letter, which I think actually sometimes is a requirement in a course. So it kind of works well with that. Yes. Yeah. So, because then that helps the manager get to know a little bit of background. We do have quite a few interns, or at least some that have already had sort of a taste in the field to some degree, so knowing that background information. If there's a specialty area you're particularly interested in getting to know more about or learn about, that's very cool information to have as well. But I usually will pass that on to the manager and they'll share that with the staff that might potentially be your mentor.
So they really have to treat it like applying for a job, right?
Kind of, yeah.
There's a lot of the same steps.
Resume.
Yep. Application, but
yes. And we should mention that internships, of course, are unpaid.
I was going to ask about
yes.
that.
Okay. So, yep. That's, if it's unpaid, it's not in the budget to be otherwise. Unfortunately, we provide internal training that's available to you if you intern in the office. You get to take the same training as hired counselors. Mileage. Mileage is the only thing that we will provide. If we require you to drive to a different location, then that is something that we do reimburse an intern for. But that's all. Just mileage reimbursement is all that's available.
Department of Labor and Industry does now.
Do they? What do they have paid?
We should figure out how they fund that.
I was a paid intern, so we used to. But
yes. Those were different times.
Yes.
Tight budget.
Do you kind of keep an eye out for an internship opening, or do you just submit your resume ahead of time and wait for you to call and say, hey, this is what we have? Or how does that work?
We create, we try and create, depending on the location that you are able to, go to, then we will make that pathway
Once you know
to the
there's
ramp.
interest,
Yes.
you'll
Yeah.
start to look for
That's
a
it.
possible match.
Yes.
And a lot of managers, I don't think, could probably forecast even a semester and a half in advance. I would say a semester before probably is enough time. Otherwise, you're going to talk to me in 3 months.
Okay, good to know.
Is there a website or something to see the where all the different locations are in the state?
Yes. Directory, field staff directory. If you Google State of Minnesota, ERS, field staff directory, you will find it. I know I did before I interviewed.
Yep.
So.
Yep, there's I think it's a PDF of all the locations and all the staff. Then you could just go to our department, DEED, Department of Employment and Economic Development, Persons with Disabilities link, and then it would say a little bit more about Voc Rehab too.
Okay.
We had a gentleman who wanted to live in Bemidji, Jamie Anderson.
Not sure. Yes.
Anyway, he kind of chose a geographic area that he wanted to live in, so we figured it would be nice to maybe intern up there. It didn't work out for him, but at least he attempted that.
Okay.
And then he got into the system, and then an opening occurred in Bemidji, and so he was able to move north because of that.
That is what happens sometimes, is that relocation of counselors who are already within the system.
Yeah. So maybe I'll mention that a little bit too. Once you're in, so I would assume this is a union, the bidding rights. So if you're already in and you're a counselor and an opening opens up, I really wanted, I wish I would have started there. You have bidding rights to bid on jobs and basically shift on over rather than applying as somebody new. So once you're in, you kind of got your foot in the door to shift around a little bit easier rather than coming in new off the street. So keep that in mind too. If your ideal location isn't available right away, it might be, and I think that's happened quite often. If you wait long enough, it probably will open up and you can slide on over.
One of our interns just got employed in Bemidji because she was from there. She moved to the metro. It was moving back home for her when there was an opening.
Is that Randy?
Yeah. Randy
Yes.
Georges. Yes.
We've had lots of people wanting to go north lately.
Yes.
Is there much of a need for our position with a chemical dependency background? Isn't that really a key piece to what we do and some of the services that we look for?
Absolutely, think it's probably sprinkled throughout everywhere. I don't know if there's one case. Well, there could be. I suppose I can't say that. But yeah, absolutely. You're going to find that in probably every single caseload, some chemical dependency issues. So if you bring that expertise to the table, that maybe someday then that becomes kind of your specialist area where you have that, and you might be the consult person for that other counselors go to. So yeah, I think any kind of specialty area, and hopefully managers too start working with you on that from day one. What are your goals? What do you want to do with your career? Are there certain areas, disability areas you have particular interest in that you would really like more training on? And if that's an area of interest, then start building on it because your peers will benefit from that too.
Would dual diagnosis training be good also? Background into that. Okay. Some of you have that from your cigarette sites, right?
I would say also mental health issues, mental health focus is also very well received by the organization. Needs that expertise, needs that knowledge. We have specific counselors that really take that on as their specialty, but we always need more.
Yeah, we just had new employee orientation numbers on that. And our highest disability category that we see coming through our door is mental health, followed by, I'm not exactly sure, was it learning disabilities and autism spectrum disorder? I think was second or third, I think, for the,
I just had a question, maybe another student does too, but if they would like to start working with perhaps transition and then shift to general counselor, is that something, do they have preference as an intern being supervised? If they say they would like to work in transition, is that something that
Yep.
you can make happen, or?
it kind of depends again on the availability of the office and the staff and what their caseload tends to be. You can absolutely state that's an interest. We would not consider you for something else because you didn't say you wanted something else. We're going to give you the available options, and you can kind of choose if something fits you or not. But if that is an interest area, absolutely let us know that.
You guys are so quiet.
Seem to be more quiet than normal.
I know, I'm waiting on all that food.
Is it okay? Can you two stick around in
Yeah.
case they have some individual
Absolutely.
questions? Would some of you want to speak to them individually? Okay, I see some head nodding.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming. Heading up this
Sometimes
way.
you put a person